The battle that began the next day was really three battles. The first began at 6 a.m. on Lee's left, where a federal force charged along the Hagerstown Pike to attack Stonewall Jackson's men hidden in woods beyond a big cornfield. The Union objective was a plateau edged with artillery, on which stood a small whitewashed church built by a German Baptist pacifist sect, the Dunkards, for whom even a steeple was thought immodest. The Union field commander was Major General Joe Hooker, a profane and hard-drinking Massachusetts soldier known as Fighting Joe. As Hooker cautiously advanced, he noticed the glint of bayonets in the cornfield and ordered 4 batteries to fire into it. The rebels countercharged. The battle surged back and forth across the cornfield 15 times. In a matter of minutes, the 12th Massachusetts lost 224 of 334 men. Hooker himself was carried from the field, shot through the foot.
The men are loading and firing with demoniacal fury and shouting and laughing hysterically, and the whole field before us is covered with rebels fleeing for life into the woods.
Hooker's men were closing in on the Dunkard church. At that moment, Stonewall Jackson sent in his last reserves. John Bell Hood's division, fierce fighters at any time, but now enraged at having missed breakfast, which had promised to be their first real meal in days. Their first volley was like a scythe running through our line, one Union survivor remembered. And then the Confederate counterattack came on.
Every stalk of corn was cut as closely as could have been done with a knife, and the slain lay in rows, precisely as they had stood in their ranks a few moments before. Joseph Hooker.
The Northern troops ran back through the cornfield. Hood's men ran after them, but were stopped by a hail of shells and Federal reinforcements. When the Confederates finally withdrew, one officer asked Hood where his division was. "Dead on the field," he answered.
I have never in my soldier's life seen such a sight. The dead and wounded covered the ground. In one spot, a rebel officer and 20 men lay near a wreck of a battery. It is said Battery A, 1st Rhode Island Artillery, did this work. Elijah Hunt Rhodes.
By 10 a.m., 8,000 men lay dead or wounded. Jackson's lines had wavered, but held.
After his part of the battle was over, Jackson was sitting on his horse eating a peach, and his medical director, Dr. McGuire, was there. And he looked out over this field where they were dead of both sides, littered all over the place. And as he's eating the peach, he said, "God has been very kind to us this day."
The second part of the Battle of Antietam began at the center of Lee's line, a sunken country road that now served as a ready-made rifle pit for 2 Confederate brigades. Lee ordered it held at all costs. General John B. Gordon assured him, "These men are going to stay here, General, till the sun goes down, or victory is won." Then the Union attacked.
The brave Union commander, superbly mounted, placed himself in front while his band cheered them with martial music. I thought, what a pity to spoil with bullets such a scene of martial beauty. General John B. Gordon.
Gordon let the blue line get within a few yards, then gave the order to fire. The Union commander was killed instantly. His men wavered, retreated, then came back at the Confederates 5 more times. Gordon was hit twice in the right leg, once in the left arm, a fourth time through the shoulder. He refused all aid, limping along the line to steady his men as the Federals kept coming.
I was finally shot down by a fifth ball, which struck me squarely in the face. I fell forward and lay unconscious with my face in my cap, and might have smothered in blood, but for a Yankee bullet hole which let the blood run out.
Still, the Confederates held. Unit after unit of Northern troops fell back from the sheets of Southern fire. Finally, some New Yorkers managed to find a spot from which they could shoot down on the road's defenders. The tide of battle turned. The sunken road, remembered now as Bloody Lane, rapidly filled with Southern bodies, 2 and 3 deep. And the triumphant Federals knelt on top of what one called this ghastly flooring to fire at the fleeing survivors. The Confederate center had splintered. One more push might have broken it apart. General McClellan, however, decided it would not be prudent to attack again. All day long in hastily constructed field hospitals, Clara Barton tended the wounded. She worked so close to the fighting that a bullet went through her sleeve and killed a man she was treating.
I had to wring the blood from the bottom of my clothing before I could step, for the weight about my feet.
I was lying on my back, supported on my elbows, watching the shells explode overhead and speculating as to how long I could hold up my finger before it would be shot off. When the order to get up was given, I turned over to look at Colonel Kimball, thinking he had become suddenly insane. Lieutenant Matthew J. Groen.
The third battle took place on the Confederate right, where the Union Army, led by General Burnside's corps, tried to fight its way across a strongly defended stone bridge over Antietam Creek. Ambrose Burnside was a genial, dapper man. His distinctive whiskers or sideburns set a fashion. But he shrank from responsibility, an admiring fellow officer said, with sincere modesty, and he owed his position to his old friend McClellan, who now promised to support his assault across the bridge. Burnside had 12,500 men against barely 400 Georgians led by Robert Toombs. But the Confederates commanded the bluff overlooking the bridge and poured a relentless volley of fire down on the Union troops. It took 3 hours and 3 bloody charges for the Federals to cross the creek and begin fighting their way up the slope toward Sharpsburg. 7 successive Union color bearers were hit before the Confederates finally broke, racing back into the town.
Oh, how I ran. I was afraid of being struck in the back, and I frequently turned around in running so as to avoid, if possible, so disgraceful a wound. Private John Dooley.
Union victory again seemed certain. But while the Union troops cheered, the Confederate Light Division was arriving from Harper's Ferry. 3,000 men, footsore from their 17-mile march, but otherwise ready to fight and commanded by General A.P. Hill, dressed in the red shirt he liked to wear in battle.
A.P. Hill is the fightingest division commander in Lee's army. Hill arrived at another one of those nick-of-the-moment things, and it was the last one, and it succeeded in throwing Burnside back after he finally got across the bridge.
Hill slammed into the celebrating Union troops. Burnside begged McClellan to send up the reinforcements he had promised. McClellan refused. As night fell, Burnside withdrew to the stone bridge his men had fought so hard to seize. The battle was over. No ground had been gained.
Before the sunlight faded, I walked over the narrow field. All around lay the Confederate dead, clad in butternut. As I looked down on the poor pinched faces, all enmity died out. There was no secession in those rigid forms, nor in those fixed eyes staring at the sky. Clearly, it was not their war.
The sun went down, the thunder died away, the musketry ceased. Bivouac fires gleamed out as if a great city had lighted its lamps.
It had been the bloodiest day in American history. The Union lost 2,108 dead, another 10,293 wounded or missing, double the casualties of D-Day 82 years later. Lee lost fewer men, 10,318 casualties. But that was a quarter of his army.
Why did we not attack them and drive them into the river? I do not understand these things, but then I am only a boy. Elijah Hunt Rhodes.
McClellan had plenty of reserves waiting outside Sharpsburg, but he never used them. Lee, outnumbered 3-1, braced for a new attack all the next day. It never came. On the 18th, Lee and his army slipped back across the Potomac. McClellan could claim a victory, but he could have won the war. Lee's invasion had been halted. He had suffered terrible losses. But his army had not been destroyed.